Just think that there's so many choices. Hey everybody, what's good? What's good? What's good? I hope you're good. Welcome. Hey, I'm Tanishkia. If you are a new viewer, welcome. I post videos relating to academics, faith, and educational content, whatever that may be. It just always is something that is helpful and educational and insightful to you. So, if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing. Hi to my returning subscribers. Welcome. Thank you for joining me again. So, today's video is one where we are going to touch on two topics. I got a request to talk about the one, but I'm going to add the one as an additional because I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand. So, we're going to be talking about time management, specifically relating to your studies. And secondly, I'm going to then incorporate studying into this as well. I have 6 questions that I want you to please answer, whether it be mentally or if you make a note on a piece of paper. Please answer them because this is going to help you when I go through the rest of this video and attempt to answer each of these questions with some tips involved. So, yeah. So, the first question is number one, where do you study? Number two, how long do you study? Number three, when do you study? And then number four, how do you test or evaluate how well you are doing in terms of understanding the content and recalling the content that you need to know? And then number five, what study method do you use? And then number six, how often do you review the content that you need to know? Okay, so the first question, where do you study? The reason why this is so important is because the place in which, or rather, the space in which you decide to study does either help you to study better or it completely doesn't even help you and is a place in which you can't even focus, where you may get easily distracted in, or just a space where it's not comfortable for you to study in, and so therefore you need to consider where you are studying. And so I think it really does depend on the type of person you are. If you are a neat freak or some type of neat freak and you need, things to be clean and organized before you sit down and study at a desk, then I would say try to study in an environment where it's clean, okay, and where things are seemingly organized. If you are someone who really don't like distractions like I do, and you can't study with a lot of distractions around you, for example, people moving up and down, people talking, then I would suggest try to find a quiet space where you can really just be in silence and be left to actually focus without any noise or distractions. But if you can, then I would suggest maybe try a place where there's a bit of movement and a bit of noise, whether it be a cafe. But I know y'all high schoolers don't be studying at cafes like university students do. So I just say maybe try and find a space at school that you can study at, or at home that you can study at, where there's a bit of noise if you need some background noise. uh Otherwise, I think the most important thing that you need in terms of where you study, you need a desk that is comfortable for you to write on. And you're gonna obviously need a chair because you want to sit in a chair. Try to get a chair that's comfortable. If your chair is not comfortable, I would highly recommend getting some pillows or cushions and placing them on your chair so that you feel a bit comfortable. I think it depends, but I think the more comfortable your study space feels, the better you'll be able to actually learn, and you won't have to focus on any discomfort around you, like noise or the chair maybe being uncomfortable, etc. So just try and find a space that represents your personality, that you feel like you can actually study in, because it's going to help you when you actually need to study, and it's gonna be one less thing for you to worry about, okay? So, yeah. Then, the second question, how long do you study? So, this one really does depend, okay? I think I'm gonna kind of answer this one in conjunction with the fifth question, which was what type of study method do you use? Because a lot of the study methods out there are usually time based, like the Pomodoro method. um yeah, I think I know that one only because that one's the most popular. um I'm gonna be honest and say I don't use that one. I don't use any like popular named, specifically titled study methods like the Pomodoro, etc. Maybe I am doing it, but I'm doing it unknowingly. But I've just found my own study routine that kind of works for me, and I try not to restrict it too much. Where this one I feel like I don't like it because it's very restrictive. Because what do you mean I only have 30 minutes to study and then I need to take a break? What if I want to study a bit longer? For me it's always like that. Like, I always tend to take a bit longer with certain topics than others, so I don't like a restrictive uh, method that restricts my time. So I would say study for as long as you think that, and that you can concentrate. Okay, if you can only concentrate for 20 minutes, study in cycles of 20 minutes where you take regular breaks. Okay, breaks are important. Please take breaks, and it's important what you do in those breaks as well. Don't now just take a break and then go scroll on your phone or do something mindlessly. Really try and take a break in which you do something besides studying, maybe like take a walk or read a book, but try to do something physical, like something that you can actually, just stretch your legs, stretch your body in. It just has to be quick, it has to be effective and help you kind of relax and then get back into studying again. But basically, coming to how long you study, it is important to know this because you need to know how to time yourself and pace yourself. Okay, because once you pace yourself, you'll kind of get a better bit of experience for when it comes to assessments, and when you actually have to write your exams. And obviously, you need to time yourself because you only have 24 hours in a day, and I don't think you can spend the entire 24 hours in a day studying. So you have other things to do, so you need to time yourself so that you can get to do the other things besides studying in your day as well. But I also think timing kind of helps you keep. I know I said I don't like the Pomodoro one because it kind of feels restrictive, but sometimes restriction is good because it helps you not to spend too much time on one topic or on one subject, and it helps you to be able to move on to another so that you can kind of cover a bit more work. But the only problem I have with that is sometimes you do more at the expense of not actually learning more, because just because you did more doesn't mean that you learned more, you know? So I think you kind of need to balance it out, kind of time yourself in a way that you will be able to retain as much information as possible, and not only just to do as much studying of different subjects as possible. Okay, does that make sense? I hope so. This is important. Okay, it's important to know that your brain works in cycles, and when studying, there are certain cycles in which your brain better concentrates and focus, and there are other cycles where your brain does not focus and concentrate so well. So you want to kind of be able to leverage the cycles in which your brain works, and that starts by knowing when you focus best. Okay, and knowing when your focus kind of declines and it's not that great. So for example, with me, I know that I can focus really well in the morning because I am a morning person. So usually somewhere between 7 up until like round about 11ish side. And then early afternoon, that's where I know like my brain kind of goes down a some sort of crash where it just doesn't focus as well. And then I know my focus starts picking up again round about late afternoon, so 5 up until like around about, I'd say, late in the evening. And in the afternoon I'm usually like mid, like my concentration is not the greatest, but I can still get some mindless work done. Yeah, so by knowing these things about yourself, I would urge you to evaluate when you find yourself being more productive aka when your brain is actually focusing the best and when it is not, and make use and leverage those times so that you can know when to study certain subjects at these different cycles in which your brain works, because sometimes your brain is going to need a bit more brain power. For example, with mathematics, it's important because you need to actually test whether you understand and remember what you have just studied. I used to think that testing yourself is only before you write your exam, so when you revise before you have to write the exam, but testing yourself actually happens when you start studying for this exam, okay, or when you start studying this topic or the content. I think it's important to start testing yourself as early as possible so that you can actually reflect on what you know and what you don't know, and then work on what you don't know, okay, and strengthen what you know. So I want to say that you need to really try and do as many practice questions, okay? And practice questions are not necessarily past papers, like doing full on past papers. Like, obviously, if you start with a subject or a topic, you're not going to be able to do past papers immediately. But what you can do are practice questions that are subdivided into the different chapters that you're doing. And these are usually in the form of, textbook questions that you have at the end of a chapter or of a topic, and also homework that your teacher gives you. Please, like, I cannot stress how important it is to do homework, especially in high school where you actually get homework. Do the homework. It is there for a reason, and it really does help when trying to test whether you understand the content, right? And so I think also, as you do practice questions, trying to actively also recall what you are actually learning. This takes me to the fifth question, which is, what study methods do you use? And so I'm gonna try to name a few that I know I've used and I know works, but I would urge you to also do your own research and kind of experiment if you don't know by now what study techniques work for you, okay? But I also want to say to basically actively recall, try and make cue cards, just short cue cards with short little key things that you need to know on them, and revise them and review them every single day if you can. If not every day, I think the cool thing with, trying to memorize something, you can kind of space it out, okay? And the more frequently you go through what you need to know, in the shorter term, in the long term, you don't have to go over it for as many times as you have in the beginning. So in the beginning, I think try and, when you're still new to the content, try and review cue cards every day, if not every day, every second day. And then as you become more familiar with the content, then you can start the week day after, or a few weeks after, you can review them once a week, and then you can review it maybe once every 2 weeks, depending on how well you know the content, okay, and how good you are remembering it. But besides that, I'd also really encourage you to make your own notes. And I think in high school, you guys mainly do this in class, where the teacher will write something on the board and then you have to copy it down. That's great, you have your notes there already. But if you don't, and you guys are not really making notes in class that much, I'd encourage you to, after school, make notes, or summaries rather, or for some people that like mind maps, make mind maps that kind of summarizes everything that you need to know on one page, okay? I would say it actually does help if you try and make one page summaries. So what one page summaries are, they kind of just literally simplify the content into the key things that you need to know for a specific topic, and it really helps you to kind of go over what the most important things are so that you kind of know what to focus on when you come to revising for the exam. How often do you review? I made this a separate question. I know I could have kept it with, the fifth one, but I just want to touch on this a bit. It's very important that you do review your work. And like I said, it comes into play with spaced repetition. This basically answers the sixth question of how often you review your work. If you review it over periods of time, then the work is going to stick better than you just reviewing it like before. right before the exam, or just in the beginning and not again closer to the time of the exam, because chances are you're going to forget your work if you don't review it, because our brains, they need a bit of strengthening. You need to really strengthen your memory, and the only way to strengthen it is through reviewing the work. And I think you need to try and figure out how you're going to do that. And I think it really just goes to trying to find your own, techniques and styles, and seeing what really works for you and what does not really work so nicely. Okay.